Good. Okay, I will start with the land acknowledgement then. Land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited southern Ontario for about 10,000 years. And we acknowledge the Shinahan, also called the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples who lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land that we inhabit together. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Seeing none. We do not have a quorum today, so we're not going to vote on the minutes. We can still go through and have the meeting and the presentations, and members can, come back and watch it at their leisure.
We'll just dock their pay, okay?
Yeah, well, that's a given.
Okay.
Yeah. 10%, I think.
At least. At least.
No delegations. So the first item is offsite contamination cleanup progress and risk creep. Okay, I'm not actually going to talk creep risk assessment updates. And Hallie, do you want to introduce this and Jennifer?
Sure, absolutely. I think a lot of you met Jennifer before. She presented last summer. She's with Integral, who's the firm that we brought in. It was time to try something fresh with the risk assessment. And I think if you remember, the ministry had provided several reports of different sites with risk assessments, and they liked the risk assessments, and they all had one author in common. And that was Miranda Henning, and she's with Integral now, and Jennifer's on her team. So I think we're headed in the right direction. Jennifer's going to give an update of where we are. I just lay my cards out there. I still feel like we aren't making as much progress as quickly as we want to, but I think it's for the right reasons still. I know I've said that a lot, but I think Ramin had an idea to do some field work, but it maybe wouldn't have been approved. And I'm not that person, right? I want to make sure we're working lockstep with the ministry and getting their approvals as we go in order to make it meaningful. So she's going to go ahead and give an update of where we are. And I think feel free to ask questions as Jennifer speaks. Yeah. Am I missing anything?
No, that's it. The only issue is that I am not able to share my screen right now because it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Try it again now, Jen.
Ooh, real time. I like it. All right.
Welcome to Hadley too. It's good to have you here.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you all see my screen now?
We can.
Okay. All right. And can you see my cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because I'm going to be pointing out some things. I want to make sure everyone can see what I'm talking about. So hi, everyone. As Hadley said, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jen Lindell. And I am an ecologist and a risk assessor from Integral Consulting. As Hadley mentioned, we've been working with LANXESS to do some of the work on the Kanegijig Creek and floodplain. And so my presentation today will be kind of giving you an update on where we are on status and an overview of the data summary report. So just to start today, I'm going to start with a figure that I actually left you with at my last track meeting presentation that shows our hopeful path forward towards resolution of the creek and floodplain. So far, we have been focused on the database completion and the data summary report. That's completed, and that's what we'll be talking about today. We're currently working on the data gap analysis to determine if there's any additional sampling that's necessary, and then we're going to be conducting the updated risk assessments. So we're making progress. As Hadley mentioned, it's slow, but it's moving in the right direction. So that's great. So we'll be talking about these first two boxes today. So let me start with kind of how we built the foundation because it was a pretty big job. So over the many years that the site has been evaluated, there have been different groups who have been studying the creek. We have kind of scatterings of findings in hundreds of different reports and a few different databases. And so our first task was to come up with a comprehensive database to allow us to go to a single source and pull information for our risk evaluations. So we had created a list of more than 100 different documents that were used to present information. And that was from a variety of different sources. So we had some from easy PDFs, we had some from databases from GHD, and then we had some that were just boxes of paper documents that were in Susan's house or basement or office. So yeah, we appreciate all of the work that people took to pull in those documents. We also got a large set of data from the ministry, including some data files. So it was a really good chance to kind of make sure that we could get our hands on as much of the data as possible. From those 100+ reports and documents, we incorporated 80 of those data sets into the comprehensive data set. The other documents, the 20+ that are not in the database now, were either reports that didn't have data or those that were duplicative of other data that we already had obtained. So we went through each one to see if there was data we could pull. The historical data was pretty variable. So we did spend some time standardizing the data to make sure that everything was in a consistent format and that it was cleaned properly. That means that in some cases we had to look up manual identification for locations. It also means we had to find some sample IDs or sampling dates or sampling depths for those that were missing that information. In most cases, we could locate that information. In some cases, it's still flagged as unknown. So wherever we could, we tried to synchronize that data to make sure that it was all consistent across the data sets. Then we also looked at how different chemicals were summed. And this is particularly important when we're talking about total DDT and dioxin-furan TEQs. So just as a side note, the TEQ is the toxic equivalency or equivalent quotient. That's just a basic way of coming up with a single number for dioxin-furans that allow us to compare apples to apples on a toxicity basis. The sum DDT and the dioxin-furan TEQ are important because those are the numbers that we're kind of looking at in this data evaluation process to kind of give us a sense of where the DDT and TEQ hits are within the creek. So there are lots of different ways to sum those chemicals, and they were not consistent across time. So we took the time in this evaluation to standardize that method so that we have a single way of calculating total DDT and a single way of calculating dioxin-furan TEQ that was consistent across the data sets. All of this means that we have 5+ decades of data in a single place that we can now access. So that's fantastic. And let me show you a little bit about what the database includes. So we have surface and subsurface soil chemistry. We've defined surface sediment as the top 15 centimeters of data, and the surface soil is data from the top 30 centimeters for soil. We also have surface water chemistry data and physical data. We have fish and other biota tissue data, and then we have a ton of different data that are associated with those ongoing monitoring programs. So we have biological community, sediment toxicity, and then some bioaccumulation monitoring data. All of that information was put together in the data summary report that was issued in April of this year. Our goal for the report was to have kind of two different audiences. One was to really address the technical folks who wanted to dive into the data. And for them, we have the database as an export in a CSV format as one of the appendices. And we also have georeferenced PDFs, which I can show you how to access if you don't know how to access those after the presentation. But those allow you to turn on and off different layers to visualize the data spatially. We also tried to present the data in a way that would be accessible to other stakeholders who may not care as much about the deep dive into the technical data. So we have kind of these two different levels for the summary. This data summary report does not include any risk assessment or risk management steps at this stage because we wanted kind of a neutral body that would summarize the data. So this does not include risk screenings or evaluations of whether the data that we have are a problem or not a problem. The last piece before we look at the chemistry numbers is a summary of the remediation history. So this has been done a few different times, and it's pretty comprehensive in the existing documents. So we didn't recreate the wheel. We just compiled what had already been compiled in a few different places into a single set. What was important here for us was looking at those areas that were previously used within the facility boundary for waste disposal or storage, and then looking at whether those sites had been remediated and which year. And this allowed us to say the most recent substantial remediation was the gravel pit in 2013, 2014. So we used 2014 as our cutoff. So 2014 and prior were considered pre-remediation, and 2015 and later were considered post-remediation. And that just allowed us to look at the data in a few different ways, including this kind of pre-post remediation cutoff. For the purposes of the data summary report, we used the REACH designations that had previously been used. So REACH 1 is the downstream, going up to REACH 4, which includes the facility. For the width of the floodplain, we used the GRCA floodplain boundary, and this is the most recent update. So I think it was spring of this year, perhaps, was the floodplain extent. Anything that we had that was outside of the site boundary was considered background data. Okay, so this is a map, that same map, but with all the dots of the different sample locations, just so you can kind of see where the sample density is. This includes tissue, which are circles, sediment, which are hexagons, soil as triangles, and surface water as squares. They are kind of stacked on top of each other. So you'll see, like in some areas where we have a lot of different samples, you might see soil particularly at the top, but that's only because these locations are stacked on top of each other. So we have really strong coverage in REACH 4 and downstream of the facility, and REACH 3. And then it has more targeted coverage for REACH 2 and REACH 1, but those still have a substantial number of samples. All right, so we're going to talk about total DDT, and then we'll go to Daxenfuran and TEQ next. This table summarizes the number of total DDT samples by REACH. So we have background, we have facility in REACH 4, REACH 3, 2, and 1 for surface soil, surface sediment, and surface water. Just to give you an idea of the kind of coverage that we have across the entire site. So a few things will jump out at you. One is there's a ton of surface water samples in the facility in REACH 4, but also REACH 4 and REACH 3 typically have like the most substantive set of data. So we have a really fulsome set of soil and sediment data throughout the site. Totals are 402 for soil, 360 for surface sediment, and 1753 for surface water. So lots and lots of DDT samples. For Daxenfuran TEQ samples, this table set up in the same way. So REACH for each row, and then surface soil, sediment, and surface water. And you'll see, again, we have kind of a trend towards substantially more samples within REACH 4 and REACH 3. We don't quite have the same blockbuster number of surface water samples here because they've been collected for a slightly different exercise. But we do have really good coverage for both soil and sediment throughout the site, particularly in REACHs 4 and 3. REACH 2 has some less, but then REACH 1 has a good number of coverage as well.
Can I just interrupt you? Just a quick question for you, Jen.
Yes. Yes.
In both the DDT and the dioxins and furans, REACH 2 and REACH 1 had no surface water collected. Why is that?
That was just the results from the data that we collected. So we didn't collect any of the surface water data. I'm going to guess, and Hadley, you might be able to weigh in here, but I think that these REACH 4 and REACH 3 sampling efforts were targeted towards specific measurements that were of interest. particularly related to the activities that were happening at the site.
I don't have much
Hadley or
more.
Lou, do you know?
Sorry, the question is about surface water?
Right. Why
Y-
so much coverage in four
Yeah,
and three?
so eh, when we evaluate, well, previous evaluations of surface water, adjacent to the site and immediately downstream of the site show no actual chemicals of concern. So there's nothing above any generic criteria in either reach 4 or reach 3. So there's really no risk, or there's no if you don't have a chemical above criteria, then in a certain media, you would expect if you're going to have something, it's going to be adjacent to the site. We didn't. So um, subsequent sampling programs had that kind of built in. So if the surface water quality adjacent to the LANXESS facility shows no issues, then the downstream surface water, again, was assumed to be the same. Because there's additional inputs the further downstream you go. There's other creeks coming in. There's other drainage features, and there's other inputs as well. So that's probably the most likely reason why surface water was excluded for reaches 2 and 1.
That makes perfect sense, but raises the question: were the timing of these sampling? If in reach 4 and 3 suggested that there was nothing to worry about, then of course logically you don't do much in reach 1 and 2. But that means that you probably did reach 4 and 3 first in terms of sampling, and then deduced from there that you didn't have to do anything for 2 and 1. Why didn't you just do all of them simultaneously, all reaches simultaneously?
So Sebastian, when we started this process many years ago, we had a significant and substantial surface water data set. So those sample numbers you see for background, for the facility, and for reach 3, the 737 samples already existed and were available for review at the time of the development of the work plan. So based on that assessment and that analysis, and the fact that, again, we're not seeing anything above even generic standards, led us to conclude that surface water as a media is not an issue. So the focus then became creek bank soil and sediments in the creek themselves.
And the other thing to point out is that all of these sample numbers right here are kind of a compilation of all of the historical data sets. And so different data were collected for different reasons. Like some of it was intended to address the ongoing effluent or receiver biomonitoring. Some of it was targeted for specific sites where there was going to be a remedial action. And some of it was just for creek and floodplain wide investigation work. So there were kind of pieces and parts that are targeting different areas for different reasons, and this is just putting them all in the same place. So it may not necessarily have been sequential.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, good question. Okay, we're going to do a deep dive into surface soil and then a deep dive into surface sediment. Bear with me, I'll try to make it somewhat interesting. So we're going to start with the more tables. This is the surface soil summary stats for total DDT. This table and a few of the following tables are going to be set up in a similar way, where there's the reach or area on the left. At the top will be number of samples, number of detections, percent detections, and the minimum and maximum detected concentration. So one thing to note is that this summary includes all of the data. So before and after remediation, this is all of the historical data over time. If any of you are the type who print out your data, you'll notice that this number here was updated since the original thing just because of a typo. So the max concentration was actually in reach 3. This was a historical sample that has been highlighted in some of the previous risk assessments. To my understanding, additional sampling was conducted in this area and they weren't able to find that same high concentration. Again, you'll notice, I'm sorry. Yeah.
A real quick part, I think it's a quick question. When you say the minimum detected concentration, would that take into account then in how you standardize all the data of any changed analytical methodologies and detection limits and all that sort of stuff? Would it sort of standardize that?
Nope. So this was all reported by the labs. We did not alter the detected concentrations. The only thing that we changed for DDT was the way that things were summed. So we summed 2,4-DDT and 4,4-DDT to create our total DDT concentrations. But these values were not affected by the summation method. The reason that we say minimum detected and maximum detected is because this table does not include all the non-detects, and the non-detects might have variable detection or reporting limits based on the laboratory at that time. Detection limits change between labs and over time as well. But so this would address just those detected concentrations without any kind of additional analysis from us.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So again, you'll notice most samples in reach 4 and reach 3, which also had the highest maximum detected concentration. Did I hear another question?
No, sorry.
No, that's okay. I got excited for a moment. This is the same table set up for DEX and Fura and TEQ. So again, you'll see that in this one, we actually had 100% detection across the board, including the background. The max detected concentration was in reach 4. This was in the gravel pit area prior to remediation. So it was in 2011. And again, this is the maximum concentration. So one of the issues with that is that it's helpful for us to kind of do a quick screening to see where the highest concentration recorded might be, but it doesn't really give us a sense of what the full data set looks like. So is this just one random high or one random low, or is there like a bit better story that we can tell when we look at the comprehensive data? And one way that we can look at that is through what we call box and whisker plots. I'm going to give a quick overview for those who don't know box and whisker plots. This is generally what they look like. The box represents the lower to upper quartile. So this is the middle 50% of the data. The line in the middle is the median value. That's the very middle of the data set. The whiskers on the top and the bottom represent 1.5 times this box area. So 1.5 times the interquartile range for this box here. And then there might be outliers above and below that represent values that stand apart from the rest. I'm going to use outliers in the course of this presentation. I know that this is some additional meaning for this file and some others, but in the context of this discussion, I just mean those that are outside of the whiskers on the box and whisker plots. Okay. This is as complicated as we're going to get in these figures. This one is total DDT concentrations in surface soil. So let me orient you first, and then we can talk about what we're looking at. On the x-axis is the different reaches, including background, upstream of the site, and background that's below reach 1 or in the Grand River. Those are all kind of lumped together. On the y-axis is total DDT in milligrams per kilogram. And note that this is a log scale. So the incremental differences between each one is a pretty substantial jump. Again, these are only concentrations that have detections. So all of the non-detects are not shown. And you'll see we have the pre-data in the white boxes and the post-remediation data in the gray boxes for each of the reaches where we have data available. One other thing to note is that following the soil remediation, in some areas, clean soil was used as backfill for those remediation areas. and we don't have the backfill data for those. So this is probably skewing towards presenting more contaminated data, mostly because we're not including the non-detects and we're not including the clean backfill that would have been in the post-remediation areas, primarily in Reach 4. But that said, we can look at a few different trends. So there's obviously a lot more data in Reach 4 and Reach 3, which we've already been saying. But also the range of values is much greater in Reaches 4 and 3 than in Reaches 2 and 1. So Reaches 2 and 1 have much smaller or tighter ranges of the data. We also have a few of those outliers in a few of the reaches. And this particular example, they're all slightly higher than the whiskers on the plot. This is a similar figure, but showing the box and whiskers for the DEX and Pure and TEQ concentrations in surface soil. Again, we have background in blue. We only have the post 2014 data for the background sites. And then we have much larger ranges for our Reach 4, Reach 3 data. In this case, we have some outliers both above and below for Reach 4 and Reach 3, which just indicates that we have some variability within the data sets here. For both the dioxins and the DDT, you can, if you wanted to try to do a visual comparison of the pre versus post, you can do that. In most cases, it's similar or slightly lower post remediation. Before I go to sediment, does anyone have questions on soil?
Just
Yes.
a quick question,
Yeah.
Jen. For soil, you go down to 30 centimeters. Is that sort of standard procedure in this situation, or could you actually go further down?
We have subsurface data, and I'm just not presenting it here, but it is in the data summary report. So it's a whole nother set of tables and figures for the subsurface data. And you can access that, I think, in the report tables and in the report appendices.
Okay.
I'm an ecological risk assessor, so I always skew towards the surface because that's where the exposures would occur.
Sure.
Showing my own bias. Any other questions?
Do you know offhand whether there is anything below 30 centimeters? Is there any indication?
There are data available. I don't know offhand, you know, what that would look like.
Okay.
I mean, I can, when we're done with this presentation, if you want, I can pull up the georeference PDFs and pull up the subsurface soil or sediment layers and just show you where the samples are.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Curious.
Remind me. I'll do my best to remember. Okay, we're going to run through a quick summary of the surface sediment, and then we'll pull up the georeference PDFs, and I can pull up the data summary report too if we want to look at the figures and tables for the subsurface. All right, so for sediment, before we get into the sediment chemistry, we wanted to have a quick shout out for grain size because it explains a little bit more about where chemicals might settle in the creek. So if you're imagining a creek bottom, you're going to see a variety of different substrates, kind of ranging from cobble to sand to silt or clay. We would expect to see certain kinds of chemicals binding to sediments, and those would be more likely to be present in areas with higher percent fines. So in this figure and the couple following figures, it's going to be those with like bright pink, almost red values. Those are the ones with percent fines of 75 to 100. And this is not necessarily an indication that there's chemicals present here. It's just an indication that this has a certain type of fine-grained material, and that might be something to look at for co-occurrence with chemicals. So in Reach 4, we really see kind of more fine-grained materials in this downstream extent. And these data are from 2014 and 2015 in this area. In Reach 3, you're going to see a little bit more kind of around the bend in the sampling area, but some fine-grained sediment areas. And then in Reach 2 and 1, it's a little less populated, especially for reach 2, but for reach 1, we're seeing a little bit of a coarser material. All right, so let's talk about the chemicals here. Again, we're going to focus in on total DDT first. This is the surface sediment summary stats. It's set up in the exact same way as the soil tables were, where we have area, number of samples, detections, percent detections, and then a minimum and a maximum concentration. So as with the soil, reach 4 and reach 3 tend to have the highest concentrations and the most number of samples. Similarly with dioxin TEQ, we have pretty much the same story. Reaches 4 and reaches 3 with the highest maximum concentration. As we talked about with the soil, the maximum detected concentration is like the highest concentration that was ever detected in all of the historical sampling over that entire reach. And so it may not actually be representative of the entire reach's concentrations, because that might be some oddball. And we want to make sure that we're really looking at what the bulk of the data represent. And that's why we'll use the box and whisker plots. So again, this is set up at the same way as the soil ones were, where we have background data on both ends and the reaches in the middle. And this is total DDT in milligrams per kilogram. Again, the white boxes are pre-2014 and the gray boxes are post-2014 for each reach where we have the data. So again, we see some low and some high outliers, a pretty big range within reach 4 and reach 3, and tighter ranges within reach 2 and reach 1. You can see also like there are some variability within the pre and post, or pre-2014 and post-2014 data sets. But in general, the trends might be kind of similar or slightly declining for total DDT. For dioxin TEQ, the same setup. Again, reach 4 and reach 3 have the most samples. This one was interesting because they had a lot of low outliers, which was interesting to see. And again, some kind of pre versus post, either stability or reduction for each reach. So I'm going to leave you with the presentation part with kind of back to our roadmap, because part of our goal is to keep moving things forward. So we have completed this data completion and data summary report piece. We are currently working with the ministry on the data gap analysis. Again, that's going to determine whether or not there's any additional sampling needed at this point to address gaps for the risk assessment. And then we'll conduct the updates to the risk assessment itself. Okay, I'm going to close out of this and then I'll open up. Let's see, we want to do this one.
Susan has a question while you're working on the.
Yes.
Your reference.
I'm not sure if this is when to ask the question, but one, way back when, some years ago, when we started looking at the creek again, the first thing that happened was a geomorphological study. Mm-hmm. And in that study, there were, they delineated depositional areas in the creek. And it's my observation that a very small fraction of those areas were sampled. Now, I'd just be interested in your view about that. Is that okay? That there is pretty much zero sampling in areas that were delineated as depositional areas for these COCs?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to? I'm happy to.
You can go first and then I'll chime in.
And I was looking at Jason too, so because Susan was a little bit. So it's a great point. So our next steps are really, I had a long meeting with Jason today to talk about this. So we're looking at where is the creek publicly accessible. And Integral, we had a call last week with Administrative Integral, and we had done some pre-figures on it. And we were looking at mostly the road crossings, areas where people may be fishing, waiting. But Jason also really brought up the areas of the old order Mennonite farms and where they're using the creek.
Yeah.
So our next step is to do a site walk of the creek and confirm the depositional areas, because that GHD report's been a while now, and they had that big 2017 flood that really scoured things. So we're focusing on where there's human use, be it public, be it the old order Mennonites on their farms. And then within those radius of that area, where are the depositional areas? So we'll be marking them in the field, we'll be getting GPS locations, and then looking at what samples do we have in those areas? Is it sufficient? If not, that's the data gap sampling that we'll be doing. So we'll be going and focusing on those areas. And we're hoping to do it timely, because we don't want it to get scoured again, right? So we want our site walk to be soon after our sampling, soon before our sampling, so they follow one another.
Yeah, good. That sounds reasonable.
And things, yeah.
The only note I'd make to you, Susan, so what you're referencing is GHG's work back in 2017. They did some pretty interesting figures that were done quite well for that geomorph survey, and it showed those depositional zones, and it also showed where there's evidence of people, human activity on the creek beds. So it's not really, it's not just a question of we've identified 80 depositional zones.
Right.
It's a question of where are those depositional zones in relation to human activity.
Sure.
Right. So the creek bridge crossings over the course of
Yes.
several investigations over 40 years. We have a fair amount of data that we're looking at on those easy recreational based use of the creek. But where we may have potentially some data gaps is where the old order Mennonite farms and how they're using the creek over the course of
And the cattle
generations.
crossing areas. Yeah.
Yes.
Sebastian?
Jen, again, I'd like to get your comments on this, both for DDT and dioxins and furans. Samples were taken at the sediment level, and in all cases, 100% came out positive, but there were exceedances. Is that cause for concern? I mean, 100% is a bit of an outlier number. And in all cases, for both DDT and for DNFs, you got a positive outcome and an exceedance of standards. Is that a cause for concern? Simply because it is 100%.
So a couple things. One, it was 100% detection, so not necessarily 100% exceedance of standards. Because if you remember, the data summary report that we're doing so far is kind of risk neutral. So we're just compiling the data. So 100% detections is still noteworthy, but it was also 100% detections in background, which is also interesting. So all the samples that we have had some detectable concentrations of DEX and furans. The next step will be the risk evaluation, which is exactly what you were getting at, is how many of those detections are above a value that would indicate the potential for risk. And that's the next step that we need to do.
But it is noteworthy, isn't it, that you have detections, 100% detections? I mean,
Yeah, even in background, which is interesting.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll look forward to moving on here.
Go ahead.
Can you all see my screen still?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to do a quick tutorial for the georeference PDFs, which will also hopefully let me show you some of the subsurface data. So if you open up the georeference PDFs, which are in Appendix C of the data summary report, I'm going to look at the all data combined for reaches 3, 2, and 1. Actually, I'm going to look at reach 4, just to be wild. So if you go onto the right-hand screen, you'll see a number of different icons, and this one that has the squares on top of each other will show you the layers. It's a little complicated, but we tried to group them all together so that it would be easy to find. So you're going to go to the one that says on, off, all layers and keep drilling down until you get to the level that you want. This is a little eyeball on the side that shows you which of the layers are visible at any given time. And when you click them on or off, it will pull up or hide the areas that you're looking at. So we're going to look at, let's do DDT in sediment. And you can click down one more and separate out surface from subsurface data. So we'll turn off the surface. And then these are the locations for the subsurface data that are left. Let me actually make this a little bit bigger for those of you on the screen. A little less big. So you'll see the big brown ones are below detection limits. And then we have kind of comparisons to background, because we didn't want to do the comparisons to screening because that would be too risk focused. We did a comparison to background. So the darker the circle for DDT, the higher the magnitude compared to the background concentrations. So reach 4 was actually not, surprisingly not a lot of high concentrations relative to background in this sample location. The other way that you can look at the data is in the appendices to the data summary report. And that would allow you to go through the actual data as you see them, so that you can kind of filter based on the pieces and parts that would be most interesting to you. This is a table. I'm going to try to show you. So this is what the subsurface sediment would look like. It's the same setup, but we have DDT and DEX and furan TEQs on the same table. So if you're looking for total DDT, your max is going to be in reach 3 of 4.7 milligrams per kilogram. And DEX and furan TEQ, your highest was in reach 3. Again, this is all of the samples over all of the time. So it might reflect some areas that have since been remediated or addressed in some other way. And then I think I can go this way to get to soil. This is subsurface soil. This is just available for reach 4, which makes sense because that's the area that has probably the most sampling related to the various remediation and investigation remediation activities. Any other questions or anything else in the data summary report you want to see?
I'm not seeing any hands or anyone jumping up and down at the moment.
Okay, well, feel free to reach out if anything else comes up or if you have any additional questions.
Yeah, just that comment, it's very interesting to see all this data compiled in this format. It's the first I've seen of all the documents, so yeah, it's good to see.
There's a lot of great work that's been happening on the site periodically over time. And so I think it's just trying to access what's already been done is really kind of hopefully a meaningful step.
For sure.
And it's foundational, right? I scratch my head how risk assessments were written without looking at all the data.
Yeah. And then just standardizing a way of looking at it over 50 years.
Right.
Yeah, 50 plus years.
Yeah.
Is that a sort of a normal way of looking at really longitudinal data sets to sort of try and, like, and how do you pick what you standardize to?
It's a little bit of an art too, right? For instance, different sampling events were taken at different depth protocols.
Yeah.
So that's some of the challenges Integral had to really look at it. I'll let Jen maybe get into more specifics.
Yeah, I think when you're dealing with any kind of cobbled together data set, you're always going to have weird situations that you wouldn't anticipate. So for example, if I took a sample from 5 to 10 centimeters, would I still count that as surface soil or surface sediments. And we decided, yes, so if it started and ended within the surface interval, then that would be considered surface. The other kind of weird things that we dealt with were designations of soil versus sediment versus solids. So in some cases, things were called different things depending on how they were collected at the time. And we did not change those names because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter for us because we're doing things based on GIS. So if something was called solids, but it was in the creek and it might actually be sediment, we just left it as being designated as solids. So some of the things we've updated and some of the things we've just left alone because we don't have enough information to be able to say that something should have been labeled differently. So we're trying to kind of retain the integrity of the data set, but also where we can standardize things.
All right, good questions. Thank you. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Did she bring up the question I asked at the very beginning?
Oh, yeah, don't go away.
Yeah. What was that again about again?
Yeah. Jen, you still there?
Oh.
I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sebastian had asked a question earlier that we put aside and I didn't write it down.
It was about the soil data, right? At depth, the
Yes,
depth.
right,
Yeah.
below 30
On the
centimeters.
shape, in the referenced PDFs.
Right. So those would be here, let me share my screen again. These would be the tables that we shared at the end. Hold on one second. Share. All right, can you see my screen and my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, so these are tables within the data summary report. This one is surface soil. We'll start with subsurface soil. That's this one, table 3.6 in the data summary. We only have data for reach 4 for subsurface soil because that was targeted for those investigation or remediation actions related to, mostly related to the facility itself or the near shore area.
Can you interpret those numbers? I'm barely able to read some of those numbers, Jen. Can you tell me what those numbers represent?
Or total depth.
Yeah. Well, here, let me switch then to go to the box plots. That might be more helpful to you.
Sebastian, don't tell me you're looking for a 3-dimensional box plot.
Well, if you've got it handy, sure.
You've got all the box plots. I think we at first came up with like 70 something figures and I don't know, eyes might have glassed over perhaps. All right, this one is, let me make it bigger for you all. So this is total DDT and subsurface sediment. So I've switched gears a little bit from the table I just showed you. This one's sediment. Again, reach 4, 3, 2, 1. And the only background we have are actually further downstream, so below reach 1 in the Grand River. Again, this is similar to those other box plots where we have total DDT on a log scale on the y-axis. The pre-2014 data is in the white box and the post is in the gray box. So we have subsurface data for reach 4, reach 3, and then a little bit for reach 2 and reach 1 in the sediment. And again, this is only the area, only the samples with detected concentration. So it doesn't represent all those non-detects that might be present in reach 4 and reach 3.
So I think what Sebastian is asking is, how deep is the deepest?
Oh, what's the deepest?
Yeah.
If you've got any data, tell me how much below 30 centimeters, what kind of data do we have below 30 centimeters? Do you have anything?
I have Appendix C, which is the entire export of the data set. So let me look it up while we talk. I'm going to stop sharing my screen while I filter so I don't make you all dizzy, and then I'll share it again. So hold on one second. So you want to know the deepest soil or sediment?
Well, just anything below 30 centimeters, what have we got? What data do we have on anything below?
Oh, how
30?
many?
Yeah, how
Yeah.
many and perhaps
Yeah.
they
Oh.
tell us how much?
Yeah. I actually have a table for that instead. Hold on.
I think some of the questions over time has been how much silt has accumulated over top of the toxins and are we really getting to the base of it is, I think, where you're looking, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically this question of how long have these sediments been, or how long have these contaminants been around? Because the further down they are, the longer they've been around, basically, I think.
Sure. That
You know,
makes sense.
So I'd like to get a sense of that.
All right, so this is table 3.2 in the data summary report. Made it, I think I can make it one click bigger, maybe not. So this is all of the samples for soil, sediment, and surface water, like the total number of samples over time. So it's just how many samples do we have? And I think what you're interested in is this subsurface value. So for soil, for dioxins, furans, it's 44 at subsurface, all in reach 4. For DDT, it's 57 in subsurface soil. And again, the subsurface soil was the only place we have samples because those were the ones that were collected during that targeted investigation work to set up the remediation. In sediment, though, it's a different story. We have coverage kind of throughout the creek. So this column here is subsurface, and I'm going to zoom in now that we kind of know where we're looking. Okay, so this is number of samples for sediment. This is total DDT subsurface. So we've got 254 total. About 30 of those are, or 33-ish are background. And the rest are subsurface, kind of scattered throughout the site. Most are in reach 4 and reach 3 for subsurface sediment for total DDT. And then for dioxin furans, TEQ, for subsurface, we have about, again, 33 backgrounds, and then 65 within the facility in reach 4 area, 114 within reach 3, and then 4 and 2 and 10 in reach 1.
Right, I think the question is how many of those samples were below 30 centimeters?
Yeah, all of these subsurface ones are below 30 centimeters.
They're all below, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a very steep drop off from reach 3 to reach 2, though, from what I can see there.
For subsurface, yes.
For subsurface, yeah.
Right.
Which is interesting. So the contaminants of concern here have obviously been around in reach 4 and 3, have migrated a little bit from 4 to 3, but we haven't progressed much beyond 3 by the looks of that, reach 3 over time.
Right. So the data that we have are concentrated in those reach 4s and reach 3s areas, presumably because that was the investigations. There are additional samples taken further downstream, but yeah, certainly not the same number of samples as those closer to the initial sources.
So can we conclude from that perhaps that when we do remediation, if we are going to do remediation on the creek, that we focus primarily on reach 4 and 3, that we don't need to spend as much attention to reaches 1 and 2? Is that fair?
I'm not gonna make that jump yet,
No way.
right? I mean, it's what we talked about for next steps, focusing on next steps, focusing on where there's human activity, where are the depositional areas, what does the data say there, where do we need to supplement more data?
Okay. So we're extrapolated.
Susan.
And there's one sort of memorable for me way back, I mean, even in the medieval past of this, that there was what we called, some people in the community called the DDT pile. This was in the north quadrant of the site on the west side. And it wasn't a situation of accumulated stuff related to the creek. It was near the creek. But as I recall, it was sort of a waste pit dumping ground from the pilot plant or some
Is it the
nearby.
island?
Pardon me?
Was it the island?
No,
No.
this is quite a bit further north. It may, I can't remember, but I think it might be even north of the Weir.
Okay.
And that was excavated, required by the ministry, as I recall, to a certain extent. But a borehole had shown that it was really very contaminated for much greater depth than they took out. And a lot of questions were raised about that. If it's still exceeding any standards deeper, why not go all the way down? But they didn't. So, but that's not a case of accumulated deposit from action in the creek. That's the only one I remember. So there are some deep spots that are really contaminated still. I'm sure it's not the only one. Especially around the waste pits.
There are a couple of waste pits before, north of PWE, or what is it?
Yeah, it's TP1 and
TP1 and TP2. Isn't that
Yeah,
what they were
it's
called?
around there.
Yeah.
Can you put up the one slide, Jen, of the areas that have been remediated?
Yep.
Maybe, we're taxing and taxing,
PW,
they go, yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
you said TP1 and TP,
they're quite a bit north.
so, okay, so maybe these guys,
Up
these
there,
guys.
yeah. No, I think they're.
The first
further
ones, these.
Yeah.
Okay.
RW1. Yeah, that's it, yeah.
I think so.
Would make sense. I think those are the original spots where they deposited
Stop.
undesirable things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the original spot, I think. Goes back to.
And they, as I
42.
recall, they have not been, the TPs have not been remediated.
Those go back to 1942 to
They're
45.
very old.
They're very old, yeah.
So are those areas that we still need to concentrate on or look at?
They were remediated thoroughly. I mean, it's 2000, before 2001. So it's a little bit to medieval times where things were done differently.
Yeah.
So are you looking for Hadley to just take note of that, or?
I'm just trying to answer
Okay.
Sebastian's question. I mean, one of the reasons why there was some concern about it too was because the way the creek moves, the creek kind of backs up behind the weir and goes into and the groundwater comes out pretty fast, so you think that maybe deeper down you're getting some contaminated soil pushed out of there with the DDT. That's never been particularly explored, I don't.
It's also interesting, it's just the background, but there's actually material from before you hit the plant. You know, the material, if I've understood this correctly, the background information tells us that there's contaminations even before you hit the plant, which is kind of interesting.
Agricultural chemicals,
Well, and
Well-
dioxins and furans are ubiquitous, fairly ubiquitous,
yeah.
Okay,
public of human use. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Could it have something to do with the landfill, the old Boulder landfill, the M2?
Herbicide use,
This is a question Jason has too, for us to look a little more clearly at how we define background. So that will be coming in the risk assessment. Jen, this is news to Jen. To really understand, there are promulgated guideline values through Ontario that the ministry's put together of background. Are ours in line with that? Should we be sampling differently, more upgradient? Because those, remember, they're both upgrading and downgradient of the entire creek. where our background samples have detection, so maybe more work will be done on that.
How far up is up gradient?
These are.
They won't get to your place.
This again is the data set that is out there, so I forget how far north they go.
Not very far.
I'm just wondering, about contamination from the plant because they're dumping 50 yards north of the plant, is that up gradient? Or is that still on site?
That, I think that would still be on site, but Jen, do you have the map?
Yeah. So here, this is the sorry, this is kind of the extent of the actual site boundary, so it's right below the road. And then yes, let me find the back. I'm sorry, close your eyes so you don't get dizzy for a moment. Gonna guess this one. Yeah, this is not a great one. Let me see if I can find another one and I'll share that in just a moment. Our background sites included a few that were kind of nearer to the site, but then also some that were further to the west and some that were, I think, further to the east. So it wasn't necessarily just immediately upstream of the site, which is what this one kind of looks like.
There's that old landfill in Bowling.
The M2.
But that was closed before Elmira was making Agent Orange.
I was closed in 66, I think it
There we
was.
Sorry, found it. This is the all data offsite figure. So
There's the,
it's kind of a extent. It goes a little bit down in the Grand, a little bit up in the creek, and then some of the offshoots.
So if I'm reading it right, they're all the way up to the dam?
In sediment, anyway.
Yep.
Okay.
The other one is tissue. Which,
But we'll be looking at that too as part of the risk assessment and what is true background. These again, these are the data sets that we have historically.
But from your experience, do these contaminants come from perhaps agricultural production?
I'm gonna let Jen handle that one too. I mean,
I'm just curious as to where these dioxins, furans, and DDT, where's that coming from?
Are they agricultural?
well, they could be created from fires,
Right.
yeah.
like a campfire,
combustion.
Forest fires.
forest fire, barn fire, bush fire,
Okay.
burning stuff. Like
I mean, it's part of the problem with dioxins and furans, right? They are everywhere.
Mhm.
So then it's whose dioxins, furans are they? There was the big derailment in Ohio, and that you sample somebody's yard before the derailment, you would find dioxins and furans. Then you find them because of the derailment. Everybody says it's because of the derailment, but they're there. It's they're not something that you can fingerprint and indicate what is the cause of them, but it's a combustion byproduct of our anthropogenic world a little bit.
So if you have like 2,4-D in other pesticides.
That's
other
different.
herbicides,
I'm
Then you have 2,4,5-T in some other pesticides, they could mix.
I mean, I'm focused on the dioxins and furans. I mean,
Yeah.
I do think DDTs are an indicator from our site.
Yeah.
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 Cause what was the background, was it the 100% background was for dioxins and furans, right? Or did DDT also
Right.
have?
No, it was lower for DDT.
So 100% of the locations had dioxins and furan detections.
Yeah.
Not for DDT.
Okay, I'm gonna move us along unless there's anything else that's really pertinent now, because we're gonna come back to this.
Okay.
And do we have a time, did you give a time frame? Sorry, I don't remember.
No, I think we had carved out about 45 minutes, so.
No, for when the next.
Oh, I'm
step
sorry, for the
comes,
next
that's
step.
what I
No,
meant.
got it. I think we're just hoping the next 6 weeks or so we'll do the site walk and then, and get some concurrence on where the sampling will be, and then it depends on if there's a review step in there for the ministry, or if we are okay with working with the work plans we have. Yeah. Okay, so,
This will come back.
right,
Thanks. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is
Hadley, would you mind just keeping me informed when and if that happens in the next 6 weeks?
Sure.
Just so that we can kind of.
You wanna get in the creek?
No, thank you. But I wouldn't mind knowing when
Yes,
it happens, so that we can kind
yes.
of gauge time.
And we've offered it to the ministry too, right? If they wanna come with us, we would gladly take them. They're busy on other things, is what I'm hearing. Yep.
It's just related to kind of if and when we have the September meeting.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Okay, this is a standing item, the 2028 order deadline. Is there anything just looking on here?
That is just really just the update right now is that the communication strategy and plan is still being developed. In terms of how that consultation will take place, but that's the update for that benefit around.
Could I just ask Tiffany if she could elaborate on who's involved in this discussion? And
Right
when,
now?
yeah, right
Yeah,
now
'cause it-
on that
yeah.
issue here.
So staff at the township have requested a proposal from Durrell to develop a strategy. They provided an overall proposal that included a strategy and monitoring meetings like this and council meetings and so on. The group that met was LANXESS, Hadley, myself, staff, and Durrell to.
Can you explain who is Durrell?
Durrell is a communications firm that the township uses.
Okay.
Melissa Durrell, she used to be a reporter for CTV, she's got a communications company.
Okay. All right.
And so she is providing communications assistance to the township as a whole, not just this. And so we've had a meeting to review the proposal they first provided. And we went back to say, right now, we don't think we need the meeting monitoring, but the communication strategy of how to go about consulting was what we decided was the appropriate sort of next step for them. And I believe where it's at is we're waiting for them to provide us with that strategy.
And we do still think the survey will be sent, but we're waiting a little bit into the fall. And then that will help us understand the population size, right, for how if we have open houses, if we have in public meetings, where, the questions were, are you aware of the water crisis in Elmira, the historic water crisis? Are you interested? Do you want to be informed? If you want to be informed, how? Is it online? Is it in person? Is it communiques that you can read? So that will be submitted. I thought it would be in the spring, but we've decided to hold that back a little bit on timing. And then once we know that and see what people's feedback is, it will help us understand how to work with Durrell a little bit better and what we're having for the public. Lou and GHG is also putting together a presentation that will go up on the website, the Woolwich Township website. That'll be a lot of where things are hosted. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, right? Because you have a great platform and you're able to kind of, like with the survey, send it out to the folks that live in Elmira, and they can only answer the survey once per computer in the area to show, so we don't have a bunch of people who aren't from the area trying to respond and so forth. And then that's who would go get the information. So we're working on a presentation for folks to watch that will talk a little bit about the steps to get towards the 2028 order and what does the remedial action work plan look like, and the public consultation pieces. I don't know, Lou, if you have any thoughts to add on that. Did we lose them?
Yeah, no, yeah, we're just we need to just meet internally one more time, I think, to do a dry run of that presentation. And then I think we'll be ready to videotape that and then offer that to the community, and then have a follow-up meeting for questions like we talked about, or do it during a track, a
And
future
also
track.
send it, your a step is to send it to the ministry too, to see if there's anything they want to see specifically. But I don't, so we were thinking about putting it up there once we knew who the audience was, so we'll have to kind of decide if it goes up first or if we wait and whatnot. Susan?
Does this just go to users of municipal water?
It's residents of Elmira by the,
All the residents in Elmira.
So that would be municipal water. Okay, so not the rural community around, not the old order farming community. They're not part
I'll
of.
have to get back to you on that, because I do think, you know, Jason has indicated he wants us to have discussions with the public, so you're right, that it's a good point. What would our strategy be for the folks that maybe don't have computers or
Right.
aren't getting that survey, right?
And if they don't have computers, they're likely not on municipal water.
Yes, yes.
The initiative here, if I could interject here. I mean, it's wonderful to bring things to the attention of the public. But I think you have to provide them with some information, some sort of direction that you're thinking about
Mhm.
going. So who sets that agenda? Who sets the parameters of where we think we'd like to take this after 2028? Is that Hadley, Tiffany, and members of staff here? Or are other people involved in that?
So the timeline is really looking at the remedial, so that, again, this is focused on groundwater, right? It's not necessarily the creek. So what are our LANXESS, we have the edict, the consent order, the ECA from the ministry, so we have the burden to clean up the site. So we plan to submit the alternative analysis, and if we have the next meeting, that's what that would be focused on. So looking at, talking about high level of we presented it September 2024, I think, so it would be what's new since then from the data we've collected. To look at the different alternatives to clean up the groundwater. And then it would be talking to the public and a little more focus on what are the public thoughts? What considerations are we not thinking of that the public's concerned about? What strategies do they like? So we would take that back and look and kind of refine our alternatives even more, focused on what will work, what makes sense. What can be implemented in a time frame that makes sense too, not, years and years or so on. And then it's about writing it and submitting it to the ministry for approval and having taken in the public consideration. But then they also have a public comment period when it goes to the ministry. And then it'll go to the ministry and take a while for approvals. So, I think the challenge to solve is for LANXESS, right? It's ours to decide upon, but we also know we want to gain public concurrence as best we can. And we want something that could be approved by the ministry, right? Of course, there'll be comments, there might be some legal challenges, there might be other challenges. But we're hoping that it can go through approvals.
I think that's commendable. The thing is, my experience suggests to you, if you don't have something a little bit concrete, public is going to be very difficult to get their opinion on because they don't have the expertise and the knowledge to be able to come up with potential criticisms, let alone new concepts. So I think it's critical that LANXESS, in conjunction with others, come forth and set certain parameters as to what they think can be done. And then we can narrow it down. At least you've got some sort of parameters that you can present to the public. If it's open-ended, I doubt whether you're going to get a lot of specific responses to that.
I think in September, what we'd be showing would be different alternatives and different. It's a table generally. It's as simple as a table of timeline, greenhouse, sustainability, cost, implementation. Other hurdles, access, right? Is it something that we can use township easements, or do we need access on public property that maybe we won't get? So so it'll be showing the different technologies on one side and how they rank against each other for people to look at. So it is concrete, right, to me. And then that's where we would deep dive into conversations. And if we could throw out, for instance, thermal, right? Thermal is something that for remediation, it's very destructive, it works, but it won't work out here because the site's too deep, the impacts are too far down into the ground. So that is one that, it's not realistic for our site. So what are realistic options for our site in the characteristics we have? And candidly, it might, so one would be continue doing what we're doing, right? It could work, but it will still be decades. I think that when we start to look at the alternatives analysis and the evaluations, and we do still need to have some data collection that we need to do out in the field to really refine it, but it's going to be a little bit of a suite of things. I think pump and treat will be a component of the long-term goal. I do think that we can maybe do some in-situ enhancements where there is still contaminant mass. So I see the challenge is, it's not, I'm talking about a table with solutions and different ways to compare them, but it still might be pieces of a few different solutions.
If I may add, like when I speak of the strategy, we spoke, like, this is a specific consultation piece, but the strategy is much broader than that, and we spoke of having like a continuum type of strategy. So some consultation is FYI. Other types of consultation is needing your input. And like there's a whole sort of series of consultation points that the strategy will incorporate, or we had asked that it would incorporate. So to your point, Sebastian, recognition that the average person on the street may not even know that there's a water issue. So therefore, there needs to be an information sharing point. And then there's also feedback point. And so there's all these different ways that strategy will incorporate, leading up to decision points and the final recommendation.
I think we're gonna have to be careful too on this consultation when we say water crisis. Because it's immediately to regional.
That's a little bit why we're holding off on the survey. You're right. So it's the historic Elmira water
Environmental
Contamination or something.
environmental impact. Yeah, that's right.
That'll confuse people quite a bit.
And you all provided great guidance at the first meeting this year, right? About how that the situations will get conflated, and we really need to have a good introduction and understanding of what our focus is. Because even a little bit talking about end use of the treated water is conflating the situation, because of this, what LANXESS needs to do is to clean up the plume, right? And not necessarily, I would love to, because I want to help and be sustainable. My solution is not to talk about what to do with the water that's treated. So that's where it's very important to understand what is the objective, what does LANXESS need to get approved, and it's about the plume. It's about the environmental impact.
And the other question I have is, going through this process, I'm starting to get worried that 28 is coming a lot faster than we think.
Yeah.
Is there a mechanism in law, control order expires or 28 comes, and we're still a year away from making a decision or a plan? Is there an extension process? What is the mechanism we don't meet?
The existing control order, they do not have an expiry date.
Okay.
So they're still in place.
The control order is
Right.
Beyond 2028, there doesn't have to be a new.
It's the ECA, right?
Right.
What is the mechanism that says 2028?
That is because there's two orders. And it's the second order from 2004, if I recall correctly, where it actually identifies LANXESS to do modeling to achieve a cleanup by 2028. That's built in the second order. So it's not in the ECA. It's in the control order. And that doesn't, so that's the objective of that secondary control order. That it set a time limit for, or a goal for the remedial action plan to achieve the cleanup by a certain date. It's not a term expiry on it, right? Ideally, we'd all like to be all done by 2080, but unfortunately, it's not realistic. So we don't have, it doesn't expire, it's still there.
So if the control order exists,
Deadline.
the deadline, yeah, can we? So would there be a change in the deadline, or you would just change the? word?
Yeah, so once we get to actually see an application from LANXESS for an ECA to support a new remedial action plan, at that time we'd be looking at the control orders and amending them. Or revoking and putting brand new ones in place, like we can't talk about details on that until we actually have something in hand, right? But it's at that point, that's where the control orders would be opened up.
But what if the timeline takes longer too, though? We would still work under the old control orders.
Right.
And as long as we're moving in the direction,
Correct.
it's not necessarily a violation or anything. I mean, I'm trying really fast.
I'm just.
But there are things, you're right, there are impediments. I was hoping to do the one pumping test this year. So. He has a hammer, right, as a notice of violation, but as long as I think we're moving forward and making progress.
Yeah, I just don't understand that process, because yeah, I don't think we'll be done in time, that's not okay, but it is okay. Let's just understand.
Yeah.
So what we work under.
There's some kind of framework that, it doesn't just all go out the window.
It's like when Sebastian's marking paper for university, the student asks for an extension for whatever period of time.
Good luck.
The dog. Dog, yeah.
Good luck on that score.
Okay,
I don't wanna kill this or beat this thing to death here, but it is important that we understand, first of all, what our objectives are.
Mhm.
That we're clear about that, and that you and the rest of the sort of subcommittee come up with various options that you might want to present to the general public.
Mhm.
Right.
But I do think it's important that we understand what our goal is here. And I don't think it's entirely clear or obvious, all right? What does clean water mean? What does, potable water mean in technical terms? If we are, let's say, close to hitting the markers set by the provincial government or by national bodies, is that acceptable? Or if we hit the targets in certain pockets of town, but not in others, does that then become acceptable? I think those are sort of questions that I'd like answered before we determine then what our options, our specific options of remediation might be. And I think we're actually leapfrogging that critical question of what exactly is our goal? What does that actually look like? Before you start jumping into potential options here. And I don't want to be difficult about it, but let's be honest about it. It's not obvious what the goals are. There are disputes or disagreements about that. I suggested, like some areas of town, the water might be perfectly potable. All right, other parts, well,
It's my understanding though that language is not going to be part of this survey. We're not gonna ask people if they'd ever be willing to drink the water. That's, we're not doing, we're talking about meeting certain legal objectives in terms of the plume concentration, period, right? Isn't that what?
Are we sidestepping something here, something critical?
Well,
At this point, this is the beginning of the consultation.
Yeah,
At
I
this
think that
point.
will be part of the discussion.
Mhm.
And I So I kind of imagine, because what Hadley said is the first sort of iteration of communication is going to be, okay, who wants to be involved in this discussion? And then, everybody else will get whatever, general updates, that come out, but if you want to be part of this discussion, then we'll send you some kind of an update, a report, information periodically. And, as that, and, I feel like it's going to be a bit of a moving target. As we get, up to one place, we'll decide sort of the next steps, but
Sebastian, I would think of it also that depending on the potential future use of portions or whatever, then that objective is going to be different. Like there might be a much more acceptable level of cleanup for, I'll say truck washing as an, or coolant, like industrial cooling, for example. Then people, the public might be more apt to say, yeah, if it's cleaned up, generally, we could go along with that kind of use. If it's going into my drinking water, totally different, probably, thoughts and objectives. So like, that's why I think the approach of not answering that question right now is probably better. Because it allows for a broader discussion of what the currently restricted aquifer could be used for in the future.
Yeah, and then what point, like we have clean aquifer to the south. So at what level of cleanup can we access the clean aquifer to the south without pulling contaminants into the clean water, right? So there's a lot of pieces to it that I think the general public isn't going to want to be part of the conversation, but will want to be kept up to date at certain points, so. And I'm assuming that Jarrell will work with you and. sort of-
Yeah, like I was sitting in as just one voice among the parties, looking at the contract that they were, or the proposal that they were looking at. But LANXESS, it's correct that LANXESS is ultimately the one that's tasked with and responsible for the consultation process. So, the township was looking to make sure that their interests were covered. In the proposal.
We kind of went down a rabbit hole here, but I think it was an important one.
I'm good at that.
No more rabbit holes. Because it is 7:35 and I think you try to end by 8, right? So, so I'm gonna say enough of that. We've got next is meeting dates and draft agenda. Tiffany.
Yeah, so the next proposed meeting was September 17th. And at that point, I believe we were hoping to have the alternatives report. Are we on track for that?
So we're on track to present alternatives. The
Okay.
report will follow. Yeah.
Okay. So I would say that then the September 17th meeting would be a meeting that should happen.
I think so.
Yeah. So that's really the checkpoint for that. That's what we're going to check on that.
And then September 29th, I wrote down that that's for a presentation to council.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And 17.2, we've kind of talked about that here.
Yeah. Okay. Alex put a note to ask Carl if there were any regional updates on that. Carl, are you still with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Did you have anything on environmental impacts of future?
On potential.
Oh my
future-
gosh, thank you.
Well, you guys talked about it a little bit. Yeah, use of the E10 well is our kind of goal, and maintaining capture of the plumes such that that contamination doesn't flow towards the E10 well, and working towards that goal, I think, is the best way to make some kind of headway on how the water can be used and what kind of concentrations might be acceptable, because that provides kind of a pathway to where receptors might come into contact with contaminants. So, well, let me rephrase it in the way that like we would want to prevent that, but maintain pumping and a remediation level such that we never enter into a situation where we would be pulling contaminants to the south. I don't know. I don't really have much more of an update there. I mean, we are still very interested in completing that pumping test, and I apologize, Hadley, for not being more proactive in setting that up. But we've been quite busy, and our resources have been tied up, and so I do intend to follow up with you shortly on that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Sorry, just a quick question for you, Carl. Do you have any idea what the pumping rate possibilities might be for E10? Has that been established?
So that well, when it was originally drilled, was pumped at a rate of 76 liters per second, which that's a very high pumping rate. By comparison, that would be one of the top 5 wells that we would have all through region of Waterloo. So that's a very productive well. That said, pumping at that 76 liter per second rate, I strongly suspect that we would pull water that's in the plume area towards that well. But all of this kind of needs to be studied and confirmed in more detail to know for sure.
Thank you.
It's a long term. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah. And then, monthly progress reports, Tiffany, we're gonna.
Yeah, just the regular sort of, there was nothing outstanding in like out of the ordinary in the monthly reports. And the biomonitoring report was received. But the big one received was the one we spoke about today, which is the data summary report. And I think that was it. And the other is correspondence by the Mr. Marshall. That was just received.
Okay.
So have we covered the new method of biomonitoring in terms of using fish tissue?
We have not spoken about it.
Is it in?
It's in there, yeah. like,
Later.
So
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, so the approval to use that method
Yeah,
came after the verbal okay by the ministry for LANXESS to go out and do that fish study last fall.
right. So, but it's my understanding they now have an approval to use the tissue fish study and rather than
That's
the
correct.
plans, because we can't
That's
use the
correct.
plans for some reason. And I have some inquiries
Okay.
about that. Do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, for sure.
So my concern with fish tissue is the kind of analysis, the methodology of the analysis of the fish tissue. Is the plan to cut out the fillets and test that, or do you use the whole fish?
So what you're thinking about, Susan, is our sport fish.
Yes, I know.
Program, so the large fish, that is fillet based.
Yeah,
but for this biomonitoring, it includes forage fish, so smaller fish.
Yes,
That's not covered under the sport fish program,
okay.
and that's the full
Both
fish
full
on the blend.
and July. So if they're smaller, are they,
Yes.
have they been in the exposed long enough?
I'm not an
They're
aquatic
older.
specialist to answer those type of questions. Stantec completed it on behalf of LANXESS.
I don't have those answers either. His group's gonna be reviewing it. We'll get the data. I mean, this is the sound technology that they do across Ontario for this size fish. So it's equivalent to how the clam studies are done, right?
So it'll tell you, it'll give you some kind of effective idea of
Yes, it's
Yeah.
not, it's a
the DDT.
Proven
the
technology, right?
Okay,
It's a commonly used biomonitoring
Okay.
method.
Yeah.
okay.
Susan, if I can, it's Lou. I know when we talked to Joe Keane at Stantec, he did indicate that again, the goal was to target, the smaller fish whose habitat was those areas of the creek.
Range as far as
Exactly.
some things might, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so they would be spending, the focus is to target those species that spend all that time in those little habitats,
Mhm.
adjacent to the site. So again, the goal is to get the longest exposure, the fish that have spent the longest time in those areas that they've targeted as part of their study. So that is a goal of the program, and that is how the program was designed. I know Joe isn't here, but that was discussed with him and the ministry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anything else on any of those items?
Not for me, no.
8.5 and 8.6. Anything more on that?
The 8.5 you just spoke about, and right now the ministry is reviewing and will be comments on that. And 8.6 is the annual environmental report, which we receive each year. And it's more on their required reporting with air emissions. It's more general.
Plant
Yeah,
operations.
plant operation, yeah, not so much the legacy environmental impact. So that was,
No one's got any
yeah.
concerns with that. Okay,
Mhm.
well, we made it before 8 o'clock. That's the end of the agenda. The next meeting is September 17th.
Yep.
So everybody have a good summer. Enjoy your stroll down the creek. It's productive.
And
The deep.
it probably would be a good idea, given the lower numbers, if Alex or the admin would send out a notice to the track members that it is actually happening, because the last meeting, it was a tentative whether it would happen, but
For September.